Antigua and Barbuda has taken significant steps to create an enabling environment for early warning communication, facilitated by the Country-Directed Fund of the BRICS program. Tell me about the rationale for this project and how early warning communication has been improved since implementation.
Okay, so in terms of facilitating that enabling environment, we also looked at what was the legal legislations that governed early warning, looking at disaster management. We recognized that you had to interface not only with the public sector, but with the private sector in terms of the media houses that would be actually involved and integrated into the system. As such, it was critical for us to take a review of what the existing legislation was and how it spoke to that. And where there were gaps that we noticed, we'd now be able to facilitate the creation of the framework in which these particular stakeholders would be able to actually perform within that new environment as we're looking to enhance the multi-hazard early warning system. It also meant that because we are now expanding the platforms, going into the digital platforms and being able to provide information and being able to interrupt broadcasts to bring that there needed to be the legal framework to support that. We also looked at what would have to be in terms of the protection of the software and the equipment and investment and installation, and therefore the agreements that would have to be sought for those private sector entities, as well as what would be the SOPs governing the maintenance and the upkeep of that particular type of investment. So it was very important that we looked at what was the overall existing structure, what were the areas that currently existed, what was the projected path forward in terms of how we look to roll out and implement and improve the CAP system going forward, and therefore what would be the protocols that need to be put in place to govern the maintenance, the performance, and the cooperation of all of the partners involved.
Okay, so how has it actually benefited persons? How has it been rolled out?
It has been quite beneficial in terms of on two folds. One, we had a greater level of awareness from a number of the private stake entities. From the original set that was actually approached, we've had a number of other media houses now wishing to be actually involved and become a part of the next iteration. So that was very good in terms of that. And it also raised the level of awareness in terms of the partnership and the role and the stake of ownership that a lot of these media houses played in the early warning system. Prior to that, they saw themselves more as recipients or users of that information and not so much part of the integrated machinery of that the multi-hazard early warning system. So it really opened their eyes in terms of to the level of ownership and the participation needed in order to make sure that the system functions efficiently.
In October 2024, the BRICS program facilitated a high-frequency radio training and upgrade. Tell me how this equipment has since been integrated into the operation of the National Office for Disaster Services and how you see it making a difference in the future.
So the training that was actually provided in terms of telecommunication not only benefited the National Office of Disaster Services telecommunication unit, but the other units that work in partnership with it. So our national partners include our security forces as well as a number of other agencies that actually provide support to the telecommunication unit in times of operation. So it was a learning and opportunity for them platform to expand their knowledge base and also familiarity with the types of equipment. Because as we know, in the CDEMA mechanism, we operate on a sharing of resources. So the more human resources that are actually trained to become part of those regional response teams actually benefits the regional system on a whole, not just at the national level, but at the national level, we're also looking at the benefit of a lot of the other departments now know the type of capabilities that they need to actually seek in terms of procuring, to make sure that there is some compatibility and harmonization with the equipment. So they know in their future efforts to acquire more equipment, to improve the capabilities and so on, can be guided based on the training they have and the exposure they've had to the type of equipment that is necessary. In terms of the benefits, working with the Ministry of Information and Technology, we've seen that they have now looked to actually procure new systems to incorporate, to actually enhance the national system as well as some of the national partners. And as such, this type of training now guides them in terms of their procurement protocols and policies for the type of equipment and capabilities that needed to be established within the national partner stakeholders within the public sector. So we're looking at the security element of it, and we're also looking at border protection. We're looking at the military. We're looking at civil protection in terms of police and other rapid response agencies that support us in terms of health, EMS, and a number of other key critical partners. So it actually provided a springboard, you would say, to actually just leap them forward into the type of training, the type of requirements, the type of equipment to better actually organize their internal mechanisms to support the national framework.
What role does the Comprehensive Disaster Management Blueprint play in advancing the National Disaster Risk Management Strategy in Antigua and Barbuda?
Yes, so basically with the blueprint, it actually showed a number of areas where we were doing quite a bit of work, but it also highlighted a number of areas that we need to pay a bit more attention to. And as such, in conjunction with the CDEMA audit and the development of the country work programs for the next iterative section and so on, it actually allowed us now to actually plant focus, not just within the technical aspect and so on, but in our engagement with the policy level to see where that national policies need to be shaped and complementary. Because at the end of the day, we're looking to have a more cohesive, universal, comprehensive policy rather than sector silo policies. And in doing that, we also have to look at the work programs of our various partners within the public sector, within the private sector, and civil society. So it actually provided a guidance for us in terms of how we now engage our national stakeholders in the consultation process to develop the next round for our multi-year country work program.
What are some of the gaps that would have been identified following the CDM blueprint assessment conducted in Antigua and Barbuda?
So in terms of the blueprint, as we've seen with a lot of our assessments, we've noticed that throughout the Caribbean and in many cases at the national level, recovery seems to be one of the areas that needs a lot of work. And in terms of recovery, we're looking at not so much just at the public sector in terms of what everyone is seeing that the state needs to provide in terms of facilitating the environment to recover, but also what the support is needed within the private sector for them to see themselves as active partners and developers of some of these strategies and solutions, and also at the civil society level in terms of working with a number of our sectors, because we've noticed in civil society there's quite a bit of fragmentation, and there's also need for support in terms of developing their processes and their frameworks and their structures to enable them, one, to not only perform and become a functional part of the mechanism, but also in their development and capacity to provide solutions, develop initiatives, projects and programs, and manage them at their level, so that a lot of these initiatives, instead of being public sector driven, that they're coming from persons who are able to recognize what the challenges they are and come up with initiatives and solutions that other sectors can now support them in developing and implementing.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
A pleasure.